Run It Studios is the home of the Run Radio podcast and runradio.net, a podcast and station about the relentless, resilient, and innovative types, inspiring strides in life, business, and beyond. Welcome back to the Run Radio podcast. My name is Trina Wilcox, and my guest today is someone who understands what it's like to be resilient and tenacious, which is something that we really embrace here at Run Radio. And so I want to invite you to welcome our guest, Thomas Wilson. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me on.
So you have a lot of experience with storytelling in general, but you pull from a place. Well, I'll let you share. Where has that become such a good way for you to share?
Um, so I always like to say that storytelling is not just for entertainment. It's not just for the idea of going to see a movie. Storytelling, in my opinion, is one of the great art forms because it is infused into every part of human society, every part of culture. We tell stories when we talk to friends. We tell stories when we paint. We tell stories on podcasts or radio shows. We even tell stories simply by our emotions. So when I was a kid, I've loved stories ever since I was very young. Before I could read, my parents read to me stories. That was my favorite activity. To this day, I love hearing a good story being told. But in my life, one of the other things that I've noticed is stories have this beautiful, wonderful capacity to connect us, to help heal our pain, and also help us build up our who we want to be and also our degree of self-advocacy. So I have written books, I have done storytelling for a number of years, but I also work in healthcare. And in late 2021, I decided that I was going to officially become a storyteller. I was going to open my business, R&H Creative Advocacy, at a point where I really needed a change. I needed something to push me through. And that idea of storytelling in what was a really dark moment was really rocketed me out of that for a moment. It created this very powerful motivation. And I'll be honest, a lot of what I'm doing now when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons storytelling, active play events, public speaking, podcast interviews, all of it, I kind of stumbled into it as I did my work because I realized there was a need. I had this ability to do and share my story in a very powerful way. And so, even though I've stumbled into it, and even though there's been so many difficult moments, I truly love what I get to do. And I wake up each day going, I get to tackle something fun. I get to inspire people, talk to people, hear people tell their stories. And so, very quick overview for you.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your personal diagnoses and how you've used those to connect with other people and, embrace our differences.
So, I am someone who is in the mental health neurodiverse communities. I didn't know for a lot of my life that I was neurodiverse. Growing up in the 90s and 2000s, I don't really feel like that was something that was chatted a whole lot about. Don't even know if that term really existed in the common mindset. Um, so I live with a variety of mental health diagnosis. I like to say lived with because I am trying to push myself out of the victim mindset, but more into the thriver mindset, I like to say. So I live with anxiety, depression, OCD, all kinds of little myriads of things. But also when it comes to the neurodiversity, one of the things that I've really experienced is, especially in the United States, I don't know many other countries how that works, but diagnosis is a very long, often tedious journey. I have had many doctors tell me that I have autism. I've had some tell me no. I have found a lot of people tell me I have ADHD. I have doctors who swear that I have ADHD, some who don't. And so my experiences are very mixed, very varied in the mental health and the neurodiverse community. But one of the things that I love to do is share my experiences. As unique and interesting as my story is, so many people have lived in such similar situations. So many people have experienced the pain, the happiness, the joy, the misery that comes with it. And I find that if someone is capable to tell their story in a way that helps other people, they should. But I always believe that we need to honor our own personal journeys. And if you don't feel comfortable, don't tell your story kind of mindset. So, in that, that has motivated me to share my story so that I can help people. I can help people feel less alone.
Have you found it frustrating to get both sides of the diagnosis? Like, yes, here and no there. Especially, I know a lot of people when they're seeking an answer and you can't get one, it's very aggravating.
It's so, yes, the diagnosis journey is deeply frustrating. I know for myself, like it's pretty common among the majority of my doctors that we all agree I have some degree of autism, some degree of ADHD, and numerous other things. Um, but there's a lot of things within that journey that many people go through. There's a lot of stigma, even within healthcare itself. There's a lot of ableism and personal bias and frustrations and many other things just within the healthcare system that make it so much harder. And then when you go into the realm of being in a societal situation of, I have to tell people about this, I have to try to process these things, it makes it even harder. And as much as we want to admit we are in this grand mental health age, we're really not. We're still in what I like to call the stone age of mental health care because we're actually building the tools now as a society. But I will say there are many good things that go along with it, identification, pride that can happen. But it's a very jaded, very difficult system. And I think that's part of the reason why I am such a big fan of certain aspects of um the self-diagnosis kind of journey, identifying, learning on our own within a healthy and conducive environment, because many people are starting to figure that out, and that can be a very powerful pathway forward.
I think getting the right tools in our toolkit is very important, and sharing what those are can be really powerful.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I specified with self-diagnosis in a healthy capacity. I
Yeah,
don't know about you. I've gotten scared about my health and gone online and Googled what does this mean? And it's probably the worst decision I've
right.
made in my life on multiple occasions. But I think one of the great things about the healthcare journey right now is we are having this revolution of people actually caring about their patients.
Hmm.
I think we've all experienced a doctor that kind of wants us to listen to them versus them listening to us. But the other thing is there's so many tools and facets and educational aspects out in the world right now. And I think within the last few years, there's also been this beautiful cry for, I want to get my mental health taken care of.
Yes.
How do I do that well? All the drama we've had in the last 4 or 5 years, that is the great victory. Mental health is being discussed and acknowledged and accepted, and the tools are vastly becoming more accessible.
And I think a lot of folks, when they do realize they have a diagnosis, they are maybe a little reserved to share that. They want to be understood, not pitied. And so
Mhm.
going about that and sharing that has that caution. What would you advise to people that are wanting to let people know to understand them and not that they're putting it out there because they want to be felt sorry for?
I love that question. I mean, to start this off by being blunt, no matter who you tell, there's going to be somebody who is going to look at you a little bit differently or even pity you. It's an unfortunate aspect of our culture, of the world in general. There's a lot of intrinsic ableism, but I think the great strength in that is learning who you can trust, who you can value. And one thing that I would always tell people, don't overshare. I know that people want to feel valued, they want to be heard. But there's a genuine power in being able to utilize your information on your life in a capacity in which you feel safe. And to add to that, I would never, unless it's like a healthcare provider, and this is on the caveat if they're genuinely trying to help, I would never let someone force you to say more than what you want to say.
Mhm.
There are doctors that are going to need that from time to time. There are people who are going to need it in a variety of situations. But if you're talking to a friend and they are prying, there is a real power in just saying, no, I'm not going to tell you. That's too personal, or I don't want to talk about that. And people need to be able to accept it.
One of the good and bad things about social media and the internet is that there is more information than we've ever had to learn and understand. One of the big cautions I've came across are some of the groups that can be out there, maybe on Facebook, for example, and they end up being pity parties and wine fests, misinformation, and they end up really perpetuating a negative, concept about it all.
Mhm.
So, what are some of your red flags, and then what are some of your green go for it when you're looking for a supportive community?
So the first thing that I would say, and this is something a lot of people have been taught to believe in, is the I suffer from mentality, like the
Hmm.
victim mentality. I'm not here to say that if you are the victim of a violent crime or something, that doesn't matter. But there's a difference between that experience and going throughout your entire life feeling bad for yourself
Hmm.
and applying self-pity to every situation because you have a mental health diagnosis or a neurodiverse diagnosis. I grew up around a lot of people growing up who also had a lot of toxicity. They would blame other people, they would blame the doctors, not really look internally. Because while mental health diagnosis is a difficult thing, we also have to account for our own actions. Like, I have had to learn in my life, people can make me mad, but after that, everything is my fault that I do after that. Um, so that's another thing. Like if you find people are starting to pity themselves or blaming the world, or even just like the usage of I'm bad because of this. And there is a difference between feeling guilt and carrying over ableism towards ourselves.
Hmm.
Ableism is a very complex topic, but there's a lot of people who perpetuate that mindset, particularly within these communities, because it's convenient. So a lot of people are taught to do those. Those are all really big things. I would say when it comes to green flags in particular, if you're having a bad day and you have a community member say it's okay for things to suck, it's okay for things to be bad, let's talk about it and move on, that's a very different response. If someone's having a bad day and they want to talk to you because they want someone to feel, they want to not only feel validated, but have a mutual beneficial conversation, that's huge. And then I also want to say, I mentioned this earlier. I try to say live with because I'm trying to live in the thrive mentality. And that takes time, that takes progress. But if you're around people who encourage you to thrive, who like don't demand it of you, don't tell you how to do everything, but help you actually thrive, that's the greatest green flag. And yes, that's going to take effort. It's going to take it to be taking in other opinions. But people who actually want you to grow and be better are very rare in this world, especially if they're doing it for the sake of your own good.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. I believe there is when you're in a situation where you don't feel great about yourself and you don't even feel good that day, it can be frustrating to know where to look, where to turn. You don't want to go all the way down in the dumps, but you also don't want the toxic positivity either
Hmm.
because that can be just as dangerous.
Hmm.
So finding that good support is very important. Now let's talk a little bit about getting diagnosed because right now, especially in our country, that's a big thing for people when it comes to ADHD, neurodivergency. Do you have any tips on seeking that out and having patience with the process?
Yeah, so the first one I would say be cautious with the information you're given.
Okay.
I have seen a big surge in a lot of people, especially within the neurodiverse community, um, not being qualified to diagnose someone and randomly diagnosing a friend or like the mindset of, oh, you have these social tics, you probably have autism kind of thing. or mental health, we have to be really cautious and find the people that we can actually trust to help us find those journeys. I've mentioned the self-diagnosis. I think it's very important journey, but we also have to temper our expectations. There is a
Mhm.
lot of resources out there, a lot of doctors that when they hear us, they're not always looking for our best. It's unfortunate. It happens in healthcare. People are really there sometimes for a paycheck or to get through the day. But I will say also with the information, not just externally, but be careful with what you tell yourself. The diagnosis journey is really hard. It's very complex. And one of the easiest ways for us to lose our patience with the system is to lose our patience with ourselves.
Mhm.
We don't need to be happy all the time. We don't need to always put up with all the crud that goes on. But this journey is really best served when we give ourselves the patience to give ourselves grace, to give the process grace, and to acknowledge that you're probably going to get a variety of different answers because the actual diagnosis on the part of doctors very complex and we are still very much figuring out so many of these diagnostic aspects in this world right now and it's far from perfect.
Which I think is a good point to be prepared, do research. But when it comes to an actual legitimate diagnosis,
Mhm.
you need a trained professional to give you that and not
Mhm.
just an online quiz.
Absolutely. And I would say, again, I've mentioned a doctor that we can trust. I'm a big believer that, even good doctors aren't going to mesh with someone. In my work, I don't always mesh with my clients and we move on. But having a doctor that you can trust and you actually mesh well is going to give you a better answer just because there is that chemistry and that healthcare relationship. And typically, as human beings, we tend to let our guard down more and be more honest with people we feel comfortable with, which is another huge aspect of getting an accurate diagnosis.
So you've been doing a lot of speaking, you've written books. What are you working on right now?
Right now, I have a variety of things. I've just started doing some educational classes. I'm hoping right now, as someone who does a lot of storytelling events, I'm looking into kind of creating a storyteller support group where we can work together and share ideas and talk about the difficulties of the day while also fostering that growth. I'm also working on developing my next Skillshare class, my next Udemy class, as well as I often find that I am also looking for new organizations or new people interested in finding out about this work, trying to get out into the world, do creative arts in a way that benefits the community. And I'm sure by the time we're done with this interview and done today, I will probably have 15 new projects pop up.
All right. Well, where can people go to stay in touch with you and keep up on all those moving parts?
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn. Thomas Rhodey Wilson, I believe, is what I have on there. I can always make sure there is an accurate link. My email is ndttrpg@gmail.com. Never realized how many of those letters sound the same until I created the email. And then you can also check out RH Creative Storytelling a creative advocacy and restart RH Creative Advocacy and Storytelling.net, which is my website, and I'm working on completely revamping that for the new year coming up. And I'll make sure every other link, like a link tree, is passed down in the comment section as well.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. Thanks for sharing a little bit of your world today.
Thank you. I enjoyed this.
Great. Be sure you're following along and keeping up. You can link over to watch more and listen from runradio.net. Thank you.
Thank you.